The capitalism system is supported by superstructure that generate the conditions to give it continuity. This superstructure, thanks to the globalizing nature of the system, is generally threatened to the world, except for the nations in which there is no socialist experience. How does the educational system exclude? Generation unconditional pedagogical mechanism, that is the interaction between teacher and student, is known. Since the teacher is pretended as a supreme being who knows everything, positioning education as purpose of emptying information in the brains of the children and young people, without giving the last importance to the capacity for the questions and analysis that their individual can generate in society, promoting false apocalypse, individualism, and unnecessary competition among students to demonstrate who can achieve the best grade, thus considering any inactive of solidarity between the socials begins that interact with each other within the various educational institutions, pretending the social division of labor in which is separate between intellectual work and manual work, assuming that students who follow the behavioral patterns established by the educational system will develop interaction work and those who resist following these patterns will develop manual work, resulting in the latter being excluded from the educational system because the school, the high school, or the universities doesn't not adapt to their needs. But on the contrary, their individuals are the ones who have to adapt to the needs of the educational clusters, and therefore results in the abandonment of education and its integration in the social productive life of the
Capital
nation.
education, wherever we like to admit it or not. It is essential lend to backwardness and with it to operation. An irrefutable expression of this is the critical reality that overwhelms most of humanity. Alienation and alienation scatters the human behind, leading him to astonish level of social insensitivity and lack human solidarity in the face of world's event. In the middle of the rich millenniums and impressive descents technological, the entire humanity faced unprecedented actuality. We highlighted some of them. More than half of the world's population is living in poverty and destruction. Acquired human behind almost 1.7 billion lack basic services such as health, education, housing, drinking water, sewer, and electricity. The fifth part is illiterate and the third is functionally illiterate. The most developed capitalists power together with their tiny groups of economic power design and excuse me the present and catastrophic future of humanity. They are guided by the division of the world, the conquest of new markets, and the looking of national results.
More than 156 million students are out of the school in Latin America due about the coronavirus. So the schools are closing. We have short, medium, and long-term impacts. The most immediate is obvious is the interruption of learning. But the interruption of the diet that many children and adolescents receive in the school, and which is often their main source of nutrition, it's also how to say this? It's also immediate. As much of 20, the World Food Program estimates that 300 million primary school students had stopped to receive their meals after their classes were suspended. In Latin America, at the Caribbean, school feeding programs have a long story in all countries, from the poorest to the most advanced. I would say that most of the children who are in primary and secondary school receive some kind of snack or food in the school context. For example, in Chile, a country that perhaps more well than some others in the region, more than 75% of students receive school meals, and in many other countries, it's 100%. The line saying to replace these lag countries, we have begun to organize that allow the contain the serving food to the students. The line said the case of Chile, where they are preparing basket as we know. We have to reduce contact between people, so they are preparing basket for the whole family, which will be delivered every week of every 10 days, depending on the size of the family and its need. Impact. When children are limited to the space of their home, will be large or small, and are prevented from living with their friends and attend the school, they become so bored and restless many times, pushing parents into stressful situations that they can turn into domestic violence. The lack of the school in their daily lives has a huge impact at the individually and family level. The lack of school in their daily lives has a huge impact on an individual and family level. For the UNESCO Regional Advisor, the current crisis is going to give us the opportunity to appreciate the work of the teachers, and hopefully we realize the most and the tremendous work that is done or 6 or 8 hours a day. That students spend in school do not indicate that the entire population is receiving a physiological shock. And certainly, honestly, fear the flood of the news and information that is reaching us having an effect on all of us children are not immune to the anxiety that all adults express. As if that were not enough, in the case of teachers, there is also a very worrying economic aspect. The majority of the teachers in Latin America and the Caribbean are women. The ministries of education are in many countries to the largest employees. Many sometimes work is precarious. So the idea that educational systems are going to be closed for a long time implies on the economic insecurity that only adds to do this like a trauma.
The Internet, a solution that excludes the poorest in the order to mitigate the effect of class discrimination. Many countries have sought of distance learning solutions, most of which imply that the student has not only a computer at home, but also access to the Internet. However, that solution is not realistic because it excludes the poorest students. Centrally, the solution could be part of the answer, but we cannot have access to this answer much beyond some less vulnerable groups or with more access. Like any issue of inequality in Latin America and the Caribbean, the effects of this crisis will hit the most vulnerable groups the hardest. Internet access is highly concentrated in capital cities, and if there is access, there is no custom of using it as an educational mechanism. Doing online classes or organizing the result modality requires a set of pedagogical capacities and resources that in the region do not have the necessary level to think that an online solution will solve a large part of the problem. In Mexico, to mention one case, only 60% of students have internet. The situation will get worse. The line anticipates that the current situation will worsen in the coming weeks, and while the most difficult period passes, recommends paying attentive to the messages of health and hygiene, good nutrition, physical activity, and discipline to give structure, safety, and protection to families and children. Children, it also advise maintaining a routine and encouraging reading among students as well as adults. You have to start with the basics: reading, writing, little math exercise for the little ones, and for those with internet access. There are many downloadable programs to get this exercise a bit. Many of the ministries have also put out materials, not only interactive programs, but manuals and documents that can be used at home. Rethinking the educational model. Finally, Mary Wynne Delaney stressed that this emergency makes evident the shortcomings of the educational system and rethinks the entire model of recent years. We know that before the crisis there were many needs in terms of teacher rating, training, availability, resource, or the state of public education in general. Internet, a solution that excludes the poorest in order to mitigate the effect of class disruption. Many countries have sought out distance learning solutions, most of which imply that the student has not only computer at home but also access to the internet.